Good morning. This book is called The Fire Cat. Once upon a time, there was a yellow cat with black spots in his fur. His name was Pickles. Pickles was a young cat. His paws were big, and he wished to do big things with them. But where could Pickles find anything big to do? Pickles lived in a barrel. The barrel was all that he had for a home. Pickles' barrel was in an old yard where there was nothing big to do, so what did Pickles do? He ran after little cats. He ran after every little cat that came into the yard. He chased the little cat out of the yard. This was a bad, bad thing, but it was all that Pickles could find to do. Next to Pickles' yard was a house. In the house lived many cats, who called out to Pickles, "You are bad. You cannot be our friend." But Pickles did have a friend in the house. His friend was Mrs. Goodkind. Every day Mrs. Goodkind came into the yard and gave Pickles something to eat. One day Mrs. Goodkind said, "Pickles, you are not a bad cat. You are not a good cat. You are good and bad and good. You are a mixed up cat. What you need is a good home. Then you will be good." Mrs. Goodkind picked up the mixed up cat and she took him into her home to live. In Mrs. Goodkind's home there was a pretty chair for Pickles to sit on. There were toys for him to play with. But Pickles did not want to sit on a pretty chair. He did not want to play with toys. He ran back to his barrel in the yard. He began to chase the little cats again. Mrs. Goodkind said to Pickles, "Things cannot go on like this. Something will happen." The next day Pickles chased a little cat up an old tree. He climbed up after her. Pickles sat up in the tree near the little cat. He would not let her climb down. After a time the wind began to blow. It blew and blew and blew, and the rain came down hard. It came down harder and harder. At last Pickles let the little cat climb down and go home. Pickles wanted to climb down too. He wanted to get back into his barrel, but he could not climb down. Sometimes this happens to a cat, and it happened to Pickles. Mrs. Goodkind ran to the tree. "Pickles," she called, "please try to climb down." But Pickles could not climb down. Mrs. Goodkind ran into her house. Pickles could see her by the window. She was talking on the telephone. Then she called out to Pickles, "The firemen are coming." A fire truck came up the street and stopped at Pickles' yard. 3 firemen jumped down from the truck. Mrs. Goodkind came out of her house. She ran to the firemen and pointed to Pickles. The firemen put a ladder against the tree. One of the firemen began to climb up the ladder. The fireman climbed to the top of the ladder. "Come, cat," he said to Pickles. "Let me help you." The fireman picked up Pickles and tucked him into his coat. Then he took Pickles down the ladder, down to Mrs. Goodkind. "Mrs. Goodkind," said the fireman, "is this your cat?" "No, Joe," said Mrs. Goodkind. "Pickles has no home, and he does not want to live with me." "Why?" asked Joe. Mrs. Goodkind answered, "My home is too little for Pickles. Pickles is a cat who wishes to do big things, and some day he will do them. Look at his big paws." Pickles put out a paw for Joe to see. "My goodness, Pickles," said Joe, "what big paws you have." Pickles looked at Joe and said the one word that he could say, "Meow," and Joe could see that Pickles wanted something very much. Joe gave Pickles a pat. "Pickles," he said, "I will take you to our firehouse. Maybe our chief will let you stay." The fire cat. Joe took Pickles to the chief, who was sitting at the desk. "Oh," said the chief, "I know this young cat. He is the one who chases little cats." "How do you know?" asked Joe. The chief answered, "A fire chief knows many things." Just then the telephone began to ring. "Hello," said the chief. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Goodkind. Yes, Pickles is here. He came with Joe." "What did you say? You think Pickles would like to live in our firehouse? Well, we shall see. Thank you, Mrs. Goodkind. Goodbye." The chief looked at Pickles and said, "Mrs. Goodkind says you are not a bad cat, and Joe likes you. I will let you live here if you will learn to be a good firehouse cat." Pickles walked quietly up the stairs after Joe. Joe and Pickles went into a room where the firemen lived. The men were pleased to have a cat. They wanted to play with Pickles, but suddenly the fire bell rang. All the firemen ran to the big pole and down they went. The pole was the fast way to get to their trucks. Pickles could hear the trucks start up and rush off to the fire. Pickles said to himself, "I must learn to do what the firemen do. I must learn to slide down the pole." He jumped and put his paws around the pole. Down he fell with a bump. "Bumps or no bumps, I must try again," said Pickles. Up the stairs he ran. Down the pole he came and bumped. He tried again and bumped. But by the time the firemen came back from the fire, Pickles could slide down the pole. "What a wonderful cat you are," said the fireman. The chief did not say anything. This book is having a little hard time loading, so I'm going to stop it here, and then I will make a part 2 that starts on page 44.